It all started on a quiet evening in Istanbul. Demet Özdemir, who had been keeping a low profile after months of silence, was seen walking through the old streets of Balat, her expression calm but distant. Fans noticed something different about her that day. There was a faint smile she couldn't quite hide. No one knew that something unexpected was already on its way to change everything. Across the city, Yaman was back in Turkey for a few days, secretly. His visit hadn't been announced, no press release, no photos at the airport, just a handful of close friends knew. For weeks, rumors had been circulating that Can wanted to make peace with someone from his past. But no one expected that person to be Demet. Late that night, a luxury black car stopped near Demet's apartment. A man stepped out, wearing a cap and sunglasses despite the darkness. He handed the security guard a carefully wrapped package and whispered, "Give it to her at exactly 8 a.m. tomorrow. No earlier, no later." Then he disappeared without saying another word. The next morning, Demet woke up to find a small box waiting at her door. Inside was a single white feather tied with a red ribbon, and a note that simply said, "For every moment I couldn't say what I felt. See." Her hands trembled. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was his. Yaman. The world might have moved on from their story, but that single gesture reopened every chapter she thought she had closed forever. The media didn't know yet, but something big was about to break. Fans started speculating online as a few eagle-eyed followers noticed that both Demet and Can had posted black and white photos on their stories at the same exact time. The same timestamp. The same mood. What did the feather mean? Why now, after all these years? No one knew, but the mystery had just begun. Demet stared at the feather for minutes, her mind flooded with memories she thought were long buried. That one small object carried the weight of 1,000 words. She sat by her window, tracing the delicate edge of the feather between her fingers, remembering the summer nights on set when Can would playfully tuck a feather behind her ear and say, "You'll always remind me of freedom." Freedom. That was what they both wanted, and ironically, what tore them apart. By noon, social media was on fire. Someone had spotted a delivery van parked outside Demet's building earlier that morning. A fan page posted the photo with the caption, "Who sent it?" The box that made Demet cry this morning. Within hours, hashtags like #CanYamanGift, #DemetSurprise, and #FeatherMystery were trending. The comments were exploding. Some said it was a PR stunt, others swore it was a secret message of reconciliation. But among all the noise, one comment stood out: he always said he'd speak through silence. Meanwhile, Can was nowhere to be found. His team in Italy denied he had traveled to Turkey. His phone was off, his social media accounts inactive. Even his manager claimed not to know his whereabouts. It was as if he had vanished after leaving the gift, but one thing was certain, that message was his. Demet knew it deep in her heart. The curse of the handwriting, the choice of words, even the simplicity of the note screamed him. And the letter C wasn't just a signature, it was a whisper from the past. That evening, Demet couldn't resist and called an old mutual friend, someone who had worked with both of them during their first big project together. "Have you heard from him?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The answer came after a long silence. "He told me once," the friend said, "that if he ever sent her something again, it wouldn't be just a gift. It would mean he was ready to face everything." Demet hung up and looked at the feather once more. Her eyes welled with tears. She placed it gently on her bedside table and whispered, "What are you trying to tell me, Can?" Outside, cameras had already started gathering near her apartment. The mystery had gone public, and the world was desperate to know what this mysterious gift truly meant. But only two people knew the truth, the one who gave it, and the one who received it. By the third day, every magazine, gossip page, and entertainment portal was talking about it. The mysterious feather, they called it. Some said it symbolized forgiveness, others believed it meant a promise. Yet, no one could confirm anything, because Yaman had completely disappeared from public view. Demet tried to ignore the noise, but it was impossible. Every time she opened her phone, there were 100 new notifications, hundreds of people guessing what had happened between them. The attention was overwhelming, but deep down, there was a part of her that didn't care about the headlines anymore. What mattered was the man behind the gesture. Late that night, unable to sleep, Demet went to the balcony. The city lights reflected softly on her face as she whispered into the dark, "Why now, Can?" She closed her eyes, and in that silence, it felt as if she could almost hear his voice answering back, just like he used to, calm, deep, filled with meaning. At the same moment, across the sea in Rome, Can sat alone on the terrace of his apartment, scrolling through his camera roll. There were old photos, a half-smile caught between takes, her laughter echoing from behind the scenes. He paused on one particular picture, Demet holding a white feather during the last day of their shoot. He remembered her words that day, "If something ever separates us, promise me you'll send me a sign." He smiled sadly. That's why he had done it. The feather wasn't random, it was their secret code. A quiet message from one soul to another, saying, "I still remember. And I'm still here." But there was one more thing. The note she received wasn't the only one he had written. On his desk, in Rome, there was another envelope, sealed, never sent. On it, just 3 words, "If she answers." His manager called, interrupting his thoughts. "You've seen the news, right? Everyone's talking about you and Demet again. Do you want me to deny it?" Ken took a deep breath and said quietly, "No. Let them talk. Sometimes silence says more than words." The next morning, Demet was seen leaving her apartment with the feather in her hand. Cameras followed her, shouting questions, but she said nothing. She got into her car and drove away. The only clue was her destination, the airport. Something was happening. Something no one expected. The Istanbul airport was crowded that morning, but the cameras were too busy watching the wrong gate. Demet walked quietly, wearing a black hat and sunglasses, clutching the small box that once carried the white feather. Her heart was racing, not because of the flight, but because of what she was about to do. She had booked a ticket to Rome the night before, after a long night of thinking and tears. She didn't tell anyone, not even her closest friends. There were too many questions in her mind, and she needed answers, from him, and only him. As the plane took off, she looked out the window, whispering softly to herself, "If this is a mistake, let it at least bring peace." Hours later, when she arrived in Rome, she turned her phone on. The first thing she saw was a headline spreading across every platform, "Can Yaman's secret message to Demet Özdemir, is a reunion coming?" She sighed and smiled faintly. If only they knew how little of the truth the world actually saw. That evening, she stood in front of his apartment. For a moment, she hesitated. What if he didn't want to see her? What if the feather was just a goodbye, not a beginning? But before she could turn away, the door opened, and there he was. Ken looked at her in shock, frozen for a second before whispering, "You came." Demet's eyes glistened. "You sent the feather," she replied softly. A long silence filled the space between them. Not cold, but heavy with every emotion they had never expressed. Finally, Kim broke the silence. "I didn't think you'd understand it," he said. "It wasn't a message, it was a question." Demet frowned slightly. "A question?" He nodded, stepping closer. "If you still believed in what we once had." Her eyes filled with tears. "You already know the answer," she said. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." The tension melted instantly. Ken reached into his pocket and pulled out something, another feather, but this time golden, resting on a small chain. Then this time, he whispered, "Don't just keep it. Wear it." Demet smiled through her tears as he placed it gently around her neck. The world outside had no idea, no cameras, no headlines, no crowd, just 2 people, standing in the quiet truth of what they had lost and found again. Across the internet, fans kept guessing what the feather meant. Articles, theories, interviews, but none of them came close to the truth. Because some stories aren't meant to be explained, only felt. Days later, both of them disappeared from the spotlight. No public statements. No denials. No confirmations. Just silence, the kind that speaks louder than 1,000 interviews. But observant fans noticed something new. On Demet's latest post, a photo taken in Rome, the golden feather pendant rested gently against her skin. She didn't tag anyone. She didn't write any caption. Only a single emoji. Dove. Within minutes, the internet erupted again. It's the same feather. She's wearing his gift. Are they together again? But Ken didn't comment. He simply posted a black and white photo of the ocean with the caption, "Some promises are written in silence." Those who had followed their story from the beginning understood. The feather wasn't just a symbol of love, it was a sign of what survived even after everything else faded. Behind the scenes, they were seen once, briefly, walking through the narrow streets of Trastevere in Rome. No cameras, no security, just two familiar figures sharing quiet laughter. She held his arm, he leaned close to whisper something that made her smile, and just like that, the story the world had turned into headlines became something private again, something real. They didn't need to explain what the feather meant, because everyone who had ever loved and lost already knew.